Hello, this is John Rankin, founder and chairman of EmancipationParty.us. Here reading from Chapter 1 of my book, Jesus in the Face of His Enemies, a paradigm shift to overturn politics as usual. I've already uploaded the introduction, and the introduction and Chapter 1 are available free online. Chapters 2 through 11 will be uploaded for private viewing for those who become patrons at EmancipationParty.us. Chapter 1. Why did Jesus have enemies? Who is Jesus? Character is revealed in the face of conflict, and the Gospels reveal Jesus most clearly in the face of his enemies. Imagine, if we can, seeing Jesus through the eyes of an honest scribe. We will call him Baruch and paint a plausible scenario of his encounters with Jesus, hewing closely to the scriptures while filling in some dialogue that is as consistent as possible. Imagine his line of sight as he personally witnesses the most epic theological and political battle in history, that between Jesus and his sworn enemies. Imagine the decision Baruch needs to make when all is said and done. But two, how is it that Jesus, in healing the sick, driving out demons, and raising the dead, has enemies to begin with? Why do the religious and political enemies track his every move once he announces himself? Why does he threaten the status quo? What is the nature of his threat? Baruch is among the rabbis, a scribe, an expert in and teacher of the law, of the Pharisaic sect, a man in his late 30s, having studied since age 4 the Tanakh, an acronym for the Hebrew scriptures consisting of the law, Torah, the prophets, Navaim, and the writings, Ketuvim. He is looking for the Messiah, as is much of the Jewish nation living under the boot of Roman oppression. Baruch is a critical thinker, and in fact, so much so that he embraces fully the rabbinic teaching ethic of always posing questions up front in any learning process. He is grateful for this training, but also aware that most of his colleagues are compromised people in this regard, being willing to limit their questions to keep social and political position. They are bought off by the Roman authorities, being allowed to maintain their religious stature and economic security, because they agree to keep their religion behind the temple and synagogue walls, never to interfere with matters of social justice in the political sphere. Thus, Baruch's relationship with his fellow rabbis is dynamic. On the one hand, they all share much in common in family and social life, and especially they love to debate theological and historical matters rooted in the Tanakh. On the other hand, he knows, and they know, that he is not a compromised man. He lives within the confines of what Rome expects of the Jewish leadership, but he also chafes at it and holds his distance from it as much as possible. His soul is unsettled as he lives in the tension of being a rabbi who is part of, but not fully, part of his rabbinic circle. He is hungry for a freedom he does not yet know how to identify. He looks for the Messiah who is promised one day to come. Baruch lives in Jerusalem, and like many of his colleagues, hears something of this Jesus, of his quickly growing reputation out of nowhere. He is said to be an uneducated man from the northern country along the Sea of Galilee, next to concentrated Gentile populations. Jesus is called Rabbi by the common people and is reputed for doing works of power, commonly called miracles. He also teaches the people, who throng to hear him, with an authority that is making many of the religious elite jealous. So Baruch makes a trip to the Galilean territory to see for himself, arriving the day before the Sabbath, for he hears that Jesus teaches in the synagogues on the Sabbath itself. As he inquires after Jesus, he runs into 6 of his colleagues from Jerusalem. He is surprised to see them and quizzical about their purpose, knowing each of them very well. Why have they traveled, as has he, so far from the city? He is suspicious, but also experiences a glimmer of hope that they might be reaching for something greater than the status quo. He joins his well-dressed colleagues as they walk out of the edges of some grain fields of wheat and barley. It is the Sabbath. They are surprised to see him too, but not a word is spoken between them. Eye contact, eye aversion, and body language show an awkward situation. Baruch is well respected by them for his scholarship and character, as one of their own in terms of position and role, but not quite one of them, for he is known also to be an independent thinker. They approach a man who is with a dozen other men picking some heads of grain for a meal. The lead Pharisee identifies the man named Jesus and says to him, quote, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath." Close quote. His colleagues join in the chorus. Jesus turns to them, looks first at the Pharisaical spokesman, then each of them in turn, and finally also at Baruch. The clarity of his eyes and authority of speech are immediately compelling and quintessentially rabbinic. Quote, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, and those with him? He came into the house of God, and they ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful to eat, but for the priest alone. Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple desecrate the Sabbath and are innocent? I say to you that one greater than the temple is here. If you knew what this means, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." Close quote. Matthew 12, 2-8. Baruch's colleagues have no response, standing there as Jesus and his disciples continue to pick heads of grain. They begin to grumble to each other as they head back toward town. Quote, "Who does he think he is? How dare he try to instruct us in the law?" Close quote. Jesus and his disciples are taking the freedom in the law of Moses that provides for the edges of the fields not to be harvested, allowing the poor to glean some food. Jesus and his disciples have no regular income and are provided for at other times by some wealthy women disciples. Jesus is an itinerant as he preaches the gospel, and his disciples likewise as they follow him. They have no institutional support, whereas the Pharisaical band are at the core of the moneyed religious institution. The Sabbath is the day of rest, given to all people since creation. But the religious legalists in the days of Jesus twist its purpose. Instead of a day of rest for body and spirit, they seek to impose a set of unbreakable rules on the whole Jewish population. There's even a limit on how far a person can walk on the Sabbath, so this encounter in the grain fields might stretch their own rules, but not the freedom of Jesus. The Bible is an exquisite set of short stories within the grand historical narrative, beautifully constructed and written for people who know enough to imagine themselves inside a given storyline. All the stories of the Bible are uniquely true, and the truth is dynamically grasped as the readers see how the stories represent reality. This is the case, not only in terms of factual elements, but also at the deeper level, namely, the portrayal of human nature. Hence, Jesus in the face of his enemies is not only the telling of factual history, but especially it is a study in human nature as Jesus interacts with men and women with their varieties of agendas, hopes, and fears. As the Pharisaical cohort head back to town, Baruch follows a little behind, and still no direct communication with them. They know they have both come to see Jesus, but for different purposes. Baruch does not grumble at the answer given by Jesus, and the rest of the group is thus made uneasy. As Baruch glances back a couple of times to the grain fields, he immediately finds himself drawn into the questions posed by Jesus. Yes, David and his companions did break the law when in a time of need. Yes, the priests do work on the Sabbath, and if all work were permitted or prohibited on the Sabbath, then it means that their divinely ordained work is really a desecration of the temple, a deeply dangerous sin. This precisely gauged sarcasm by Jesus is in the face of the calculated hostility of the Pharisees. It affronts their status deeply, but they cannot refute how Jesus handles the Scriptures. The Pharisees are also hypocritical as they seek to maintain their position that it is unlawful to pick heads of grain on the Sabbath. Their laws about the Sabbath go well beyond the nature and purpose of the law of Moses, reflecting a legalistic view of sacrifice and religion, and an attempt to control the lives of others. These are elitists who are happy to condemn the innocent in pursuit of maintaining their social positions. Their proper ritual sacrifices trump mercy. It is a mercy to which Jesus is inviting them, even as he boldly, easily responds to their sharp confrontation. But Baruch probes deeper yet, for Jesus has merely posed tough questions, the very nature of rabbinic teaching, rooting himself in the shared knowledge of the Tanakh along with the Pharisees. What is the original purpose of the Sabbath? Jesus makes two astounding claims. First, to be the one who is greater than the temple, and second, to declare himself the Son of Man who is Lord of the Sabbath. This is only language that can come from the Messiah, known also as the Son of David, heir to the founding king of Jerusalem, and from the one who also precedes the concept and existence of the temple. Then the final if question spoken by Jesus are words quoted from the prophet Hosea. The Lord God desires mercy, not sacrifice. His colleagues are showing no mercy, but also cannot answer Jesus. Baruch's colleagues indeed put their whole identity into the temple, its preservation, and the sacrificial system within its precincts. King Herod the Great had rebuilt it for them in the grandest splendor, with the courtyard still unfinished, some 50 years earlier. It is the Roman bribe to keep the Jewish elite in line. Jesus is a threat to this arrangement, claiming an authority greater than that of the Pharisees, and in exposing their hypocrisies. Baruch has stepped into a whirlwind. Then glancing back one more time, Baruch sees Jesus and his disciples also heading toward town. And as soon as his colleagues notice the same, they halt and recalculate their direction to keep close at his heels. Jesus goes into a local synagogue to teach, and as the Pharisees follow, they see a man standing there with a shriveled hand. Thus they watch Jesus closely to see if he will heal the man, quote unquote, on the Sabbath, Mark 3:2, and find reason for accusation. They have already criticized Jesus on what is lawful in the grain fields, and now they stand there ready to accuse him of violating the Sabbath if he does the work of healing on that day. They are willing to crush the innocent and hungry in the name of the law, to forbid healing in the name of the law, and to maintain the proper legal sacrifice of worship on the Sabbath. But all the while, they sacrifice possible acts of mercy. Jesus addresses this conflict head-on and calls the man to stand up in front of the whole assembly. Jesus is face-to-face with his enemies as his eyes meet their eyes, the eyes of the crippled man and the eyes of all the onlookers. In his pregnant moment, for perhaps a few seconds, Jesus looks intently, assessing the situation and the human souls being laid bare. This man, if he were to be identified as a follower of Jesus by the religious authorities, could be expelled from the synagogue. He could be thrown out of his social network that helps provide for his needs, given his handicap in working and providing for himself. He shows bold faith. Jesus poses a question, and Baruch chooses to stand off to the side, identifying more as an onlooker than a Pharisee, despite his attire. Quote, "What is lawful on the Sabbath, or which is lawful on the Sabbath? To do the good or to do evil, to save the soul or to kill," close quote. Verse 4. Can we imagine ourselves in this assembly? What would have been our response? Jesus continues to look straight at them. They move their feet nervously as they now avert eye contact, and thus, quote, they remained silent, close quote, verse 4. The poignancy of this moment of conflict drapes the room, and the whole assembly is motionless, breathless, and awaiting the words of Jesus. Continuing in the text, and he looked around at them in anger, deeply grieved at their hardness of heart, and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. So the Pharisees went out immediately and counseled with the Herodians in order to give him over to destruction. Verses 5 through 6. Baruch has never seen such intensely heated eyes in a man, of an anger rooted in mercy, and as displayed in the face of those who hate mercy. Jesus undercuts his enemies at the level of the human conscience. In his presence, their souls are publicly unmasked, not only for hypocrisy in matters of the law, but also revealing that the law of Moses is but a pretext for them. They do not care for the poor and diseased, as does the law of Moses. They do not choose the good and life for others, as the law of Moses calls them to do. Instead, they trample whomever to get whatever they want, and here plot to destroy Jesus for his interference with their evil. And in their plot, they are willing to co-conspire with the Herodians, members of the political party of Herod, whom they otherwise despise. Jesus stands in the face of his plotting enemies, and Baruch is captivated by the drama, thinking about nothing else as he returns to Jerusalem. Later, in a third encounter in observing Jesus, Baruch crosses paths with him in Judea across the Jordan. He observes some of his fellow Pharisees question Jesus on the matter of divorce. In their nervous demeanor and their studied avoidance of looking directly into the eyes of Jesus, Baruch sees the unease again. They are again trying to trap Jesus. And they misrepresent the Torah. Quote, "Is it lawful for a man to release his wife for any reason?" Close quote. Matthew 19:3. Jesus answers, quote, "Have you not read?" Close quote. Verse 4. And then quotes two crucial passages from creation about marriage as ordained by the Creator, concluding, quote, "So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Accordingly, whom God has joined together, let no man separate." Close quote, verse 6. His interrogative, quote, "Have you never read?" Close quote, is damning in its sarcasm, designed to hold the Pharisees accountable to whom they claim to be. And Jesus uses it elsewhere. Namely, they are rabbis. They know every word in the Tanakh. And two, they view Jesus as an uneducated man from the countryside. He should be easy prey for them if their elitist assumptions are true. Instead, Jesus challenges them to an honest debate in the face of their dishonest agenda. Baruch knows that the very idea of divorce, quote unquote, for any reason, has nothing to do with the law of Moses. Yet his Pharisaical friends come at it again, quote, "Why then did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and release her?" Close quote, verse 7. Baruch anticipates the answer Jesus gives. Moses does not, quote unquote, command, but, quote unquote, permits divorce due to the hardened hearts of men. And the only reason it is ever permissible is due to marital unfaithfulness. The Pharisees are unable to answer or give further challenge in the moment. But as the Gospels portray, they always regroup and invent a new angle to entrap him. Jesus is in control of all he does, and Baruch is captivated by the honest theater. Why did Jesus have enemies? The proud hate mercy for the needy, because they will not admit their own needfulness. Thank you. This is John Rankin, EmancipationParty.us, and God bless.